Presented by the Making Star Wars Podcasting Network. This is the Cantina Cast, your watering hole for thought-provoking Star Wars discussion, character dissections, quote and scene analysis, honest opinions on the Star Wars news that interests you, and whatever else these guys come up with. Here are your hosts, Mike and Joao.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 214, The Last Jedi, the Luke Skywalker character dissection, I guess we're going to, or is it like a annotation to everything else that we've done, Joao? I don't know. But Joao, welcome to the show. Say hello there.
Those are too big of words. The only words I want to hear are hello there.
There you go. A lot of people will be happy to hear that. All right. Well, there isn't much news to get into. I mean, I went over it with Albert last week with JJ handing the script in, and that was interesting that as soon as the Last Jedi comes out, they're handing in the script for episode 9.
Did they hand in the script, or was it the pitch?
Draft,
like he just went in and kind of, this is going to happen, and then Kylo's going to pull out a Lego set, and him and Rey are going to build it, and it's going to be like they're really going to bond over that, and it's going to really set the galaxy right.
They're going to rebuild Snoke.
They're going to build a Lego Snoke,
that's
a big one, big 9-foot tall one. So anyway.
Exactly. But you do have a bit of a rant, and this is one I actually agree with you in a sense, is, I mean, granted, our pal R2, our favorite droid, I mean, he is still the best droid there is in the galaxy far, far away. I don't care what anyone says. BB, you may be cute and everything, but you're no R2-D2, man. I'm
Absolutely.
sorry. I'm just, throw hate mail at me if you want. I really don't care. R2 is the man, if you ask me. Is the fact that he's been relegated to really not much of anything. Yeah, he had the big moment with Luke. You know, that was an important scene to me.
The only thing we know that works on his body
anymore
is the projector.
Pretty much. I mean, well,
that's what he used in both movies.
He did plug into the machine.
Yeah, so his little sticks. His arm still works. His little, like, I was going to call it his stick, but we don't want to go. That's his walking stick.
Yeah. We don't want to do that. But anyway. But you're a little, you said in Discord earlier.
This is not, this is not a complaint. This is a plea to J.J. Abrams. Can R2 have one more big moment like he did in the prequels? And everybody's going to say, oh, God, don't do that from we're trying to get away. It's new. No, BB-8 went on a rampage in this movie.
literally,
and
with the walker.
Multiple times, like he's shooting coins like a machine gun. He steals the walker. The very beginning scene with Poe is very, it's
got the line, right?
Crazy badass, but yeah, I mean, like BB-8, like he wasn't in the movie like a whole lot. Like he wasn't like a centerpiece story wise, like he was last time around. But he got to do like a lot of like crazy prequel R2 stuff. So anyway, it's just my plea to JJ. Just give R2 Luke, we saw Luke in The Last Jedi. Like he comes back and he's, almost looking like Yoda, like the way he's kind of dodging some of those moves in that form. I don't know if the real physical Luke could do that. I assume he maybe could, if it got right down to it in the fight. He like Yoda puts down the walking stick. So anyway, it can be like a mirror, like his friend R2, he gets to have that one last big hurrah, like the old man R2 stepping up to the plate. He's got one more burst left in him. Like, what's that? Herm Edwards, he says he's got one more hit left in him.
Well, that's our next, the spinoff, R2, the last astromech. A Star Wars story. We could do something like that if you want. We can
so anyway, it's not a complaint that it hasn't happened. It's a plea to make it happen in episode 9. Please, JJ, because how much? I mean, we might not get any more R2 like after 9. Things are at a crossroads here, in my opinion. So
that's true.
We need one more R2 moment. So that's my silly plea to JJ.
All right. Well, let's get into the man of the hour, which is Luke Skywalker. We waited a whole 2 years. To see him get the saber, and all he does is throw it over his shoulder. So the interesting.
Well, is it like a salt shaker, like when you throw salt? I was thinking the whole salt shaker, like Dumb and Dumber, but
no.
Kick his ass, Seabass. So you throw it over your shoulder for luck. well, maybe the lightsaber is bad luck, he figures, so he's going to throw it over his shoulder like salt, and that ties in the crate somehow. And I'm being stupid. I'm being silly on purpose, but I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, it was a weird scene when he throws it behind his shoulder. It was obviously everybody laughs, but I think some people kind of have a complaint with it. But I don't know.
I took an issue with it the first time, but thinking of, because we're going to get into Luke's mindset here, is when he tosses it, it's a sense of he's not attached to any of all that, and it kind of sets the tone. In a sense, like he doesn't even care about Han, Leia, Chewie, the Falcon. Well, he does to a degree, but as he, as we'll get into,
is it maybe a little bit of denial there too? Like
maybe
this person, somebody found me. They weren't supposed to be able to do that, and they've got this lightsaber, and it's just like, this is not how I thought this day was going to go.
that's as Han would say, this is not how I thought this day was going to go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he should have. Yeah, it would have been apropos.
Yeah, well, because he does, you got to think of it. The last time he saw it was like 30 years ago, and his hand was attached, and now this person out of nowhere comes up here, shows him that saber, and he's going to be like, what the heck? And then, like, all right, I'm getting rid of this, and maybe this will set the tone for this girl, and she'll leave, and it won't be a big deal, and then he walks away discussed, like, all right, what's going on here? But what I really want to talk about is what we saw in the visual dictionary, which you pointed out to me when we saw all the spoilers coming out, which you didn't want to do, but it ended up happening anyway. With the you kind of ran away after all this stuff. I kept going in, and I probably shouldn't have. But the visual dictionary says when he puts on those robes, he cut himself off from the Force and everything, but he put those robes on for a last rite as a Jedi in a sense, because he was going to die right then and there. And that was like kind of stunning to us when you read it to me. You texted me back and said, "Oh my God, he was up there to die. He wasn't really to do anything else." So that's the way it feels from the visual dictionary. It's the way it reads, but I don't get that from the movie necessarily. Yeah. But it does make sense, because when he burns down the tree, I mean, I don't know. What was he going to do? Sit there in the tree and burn with it at that point? Because he puts the robes back on then as well. And obviously he's wearing them at the end, but he also has them. I mean, it's really not, I don't think there's that much interpretation to it. I mean, it's kind of like that's, I'm not necessarily saying he was going to like jump off the cliff, but I mean, obviously it was going to be something of trying to do that transcendent moment or something, how he does at the end of the movie. Maybe he was going to attempt some kind of other version where he would become one with the Force or something. It's the only thing I could take out of it. Like, I mean, we've seen crazy as it is to think, I mean, we've seen suicide on the Clone Wars before with suicide bombers. And so it's not a completely foreign concept to Star Wars about somebody taking their own life for a reason. But, obviously, I guess at that point, it wasn't sacrifice. So I don't know. Yeah, it is. I didn't know what to think, and that was before we saw the movie, and we saw it. And I still don't have any answers as far as him at the beginning of the movie there with all that. Well, true, because that going into it, and I'm thinking of like when I'm watching him in the robes and everything, and after, like before he even throws the saber, I'm like, he was there to just kind of end it. In a sense. And then Snoke reiterates it when he says, "We will give him the death that he so desires."
Well, he says, "I came here to die."
Yeah, exactly.
He does admit that later, not in that moment, but he does admit it later. But that can be interpreted a couple different ways. It could be, "I came here to
live out my days."
Live out my days, and when I die, I die. Or, "I came here to end my life." I mean, it could mean either or. But when he says it in that moment, I take it more like he was there to live out his days, is the way I felt about it. But that's not. Well, I can't call it a fact.
I call it as when we see him in The Force Awakens and at the beginning of this movie. I think his plan was to transcend at that point. But then he realized she shows up, and then he kind of goes back into his routine because he knows something is up. So he goes back into the thing. He's kind of maybe mad because I was. So
he doesn't want to be involved, but he's just curious enough that he's like letting certain things start to unfold.
Exactly. And then he goes in, and maybe he's a little bit mad when he goes in to change to his garbage hunting clothes, I guess you could say. And he's in there, and he's kind of seems like he's a little bit upset. And then he's like, "Well, I want to live my routine, see what goes on here, and see what this girl's doing and all that other stuff." Just because Luke is a curious person anyway, and maybe he's out of tune with the Force at that point. But maybe he's saying, well, maybe the Force is kind of trying to get to me, and maybe I need to listen, so to speak, and that's how I took it. But in any case, I wanted.
Well, I mean, it's a huge like mirrored parallel or whatever you want to call it. Where in the first one he wants to get off Tatooine so bad.
Now he wants to stay,
and he can't get there. There are people trying to keep him there, and now he wants to stay, and there's somebody trying to pluck him from there. It's oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing, only different, as I like to say.
Yes. And there was twin sons, but yet there was, which I found out today in the visual dictionary, that Ash-2 has 2 sons and not 1. So I was, because I had a little bit of a wondering with that whole ending.
But do you think he was like, he wasn't all there at the end? He was kind of seeing the light or something?
Well, not
things?
Exactly like that, but I thought he was like, not like, he force projects. I thought like mystical stuff was going on, and he wanted to see one last sunset on Tatooine, and he kind of just could see it somehow, but it turns out there's twin suns on Ash-2, which is interesting because it's a water planet. You would think it'd be a dust ball like Tatooine, but in any case, there's one bit of I guess it's controversy with the whole, because this is where the detractors of the movie are with Luke and how things are, and I don't really want to bring it into the character dissection, but it's kind of going to be talked about, Joe, in a sense, and we'll do it right at the top of the show. But the two things that people are having a problem with is Luke dying, or is it the idea that he was going to kill Ben, which I think I have more of an issue with, but I'm intrigued by it. That
seems to be the one everybody goes to, because I'm, again, like I think there's something odd going on with Luke's death. So, I mean, I think people are holding out some kind of hope that something is askew here. Like, I don't think that he's going to be a normal person, but I'm not sure he's going to be a normal Force ghost either, if that makes any sense. I think he may be something else, so maybe that could be interesting. I'll just say I hope that they don't drag out the mystery of whether he'll be in this movie or not. I hope they just say this movie is Mark Hamill is starring in this movie. They don't have to say any more than that, but I hope they don't try to keep his involvement a secret or something. Well, I think I've been thinking about that the last couple of days. I just hope they don't do that.
Well, that's half the problem with the way they marketed this whole film, which I think got people worked up, but that's what they do, and that's how it is. But in any case, I think the bigger issue is like I have, and I'm intrigued by it. I'm not saying I hate it or poo-poo that. It felt weird to me at first when we find out, and I think what helped was the two perspectives on this whole he went in to kill Ben type of thing. Where you get Luke's perspective and you get Kylo or Ben's perspective on the situation, which you mentioned on the last episode you were on, Joa, is where we get two perspectives and you got to kind of figure out what the truth is or who's the truth. Are they both to blame? That type of thing. I thought that was an interesting aspect. But
well, then Luke has a second version, which we are led to believe is the truth because it's the middle. It's the balance of the two stories. But it's still a version. It's still Luke's second story on it. So, I mean, is it going to lie a second time? I mean, he lied one time. I'm just saying, is it out of the realm of possibility that he would lie again? So,
well, it's interesting.
I don't know. Maybe not.
It's interesting that he would lie because in my mind, and this is where the older fans are trying to reconcile this, and I've come to peace with it. I'm fine with it.
Well, maybe it's not a lie. Maybe it's like he left out a couple pieces of key information more than like straight up lying.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think he lied. He just wasn't full on. And really, at that point, what business of it is Rey's for him to go and tell these personal things about himself? So, I mean, I don't want to sit here and like we're picking him apart. I mean, he has his reasons for saying it the way he said it the first time. So I don't want to call it an outright lie. Luke's a liar, but it wasn't the full truth. I think that's at least safe to say.
All right. Well, let's get into Luke being broken down at this point. And Mark Hamill has said a few things. He fundamentally disagreed with where Ryan went with this. And it's funny, the first screening of
people keep saying, but wait a minute, wait, let's. Mark says things like that all the time,
correct? And
there's always a but afterwards, and everybody's taking. I know there's YouTube videos where he tears the Force Awakens apart, but I've seen all the
but he
full
says
interview.
After that, but JJ was right or whatever. Yeah, I get that.
It's basic crappy video editing, and these YouTube videos like trick you, or people only use part of the quote. And that's where you have to read like the whole passage and then realize these magazines are like in whatever these press junkets are. It's all clickbaity, just to get the hot view. And then, so people on Reddit say, hey, go look at this link and what Mark Hamill bashed the Last Jedi. And that's not really what's happening. It's yeah, I felt this way at first, and then we got into actually making the movie, and my opinion changed, is basically what he always says.
All right, well, that's where I was going with it. I wasn't really going on the tangent of that whole him hating it or not hating it or anything like that.
Well, I just wanted to point that out because I've been seeing I've seen it in our own Discord, and I've seen it all over the internet. And you mentioned it, I had to get off my chest.
Okay, fair enough. But my point,
let's just not use half quotes. Like, we got to use the whole quotes. I mean, it's just the way it is, and that goes for everybody. You can't. I mean, because then you're just I think it's a fabrication of what's really being said.
Well,
so anyway,
what I was going to say when I was saying that Mark said this, I was going to say, however, because he said before I was wrong, but we said with the cliffhanger with JJ and all that other stuff, and like you were saying at the top, where he didn't like it at first, but he got used to it. And it's like I was thinking that after my first viewing, I went my second viewing and I started seeing it that way, because then I started thinking to myself with my own life, because the importance with Luke is that I relate to him, you relate to him, a lot of us relate, and that's with all the characters really, but Luke is extra special in a way, is where I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm in my 40s now. I've had plenty of regret. I've had plenty of mistakes. I feel guilty about a lot of things and stuff like that. I'm a broken man at times as well. And you see Luke being that way, and you're like, all right, yeah, that makes him more human. That makes him more real and more sympathetic.
Do we want like the knight in shining armor?
Luke, yeah, exactly.
I think that's the difference here, is we're seeing what actually happens even to the mightiest of heroes. I mean, that's kind of, people say how many bold directions, everything. That's what happens to like all of these characters eventually. If they all become kind of broken down and shells of them former self. I mean, the most prime example would be Darth Vader, but Obi-Wan, Yoda, like everybody, there's so many characters that just become, it's a repeating theme where they become, you're not what you once were. You're not the same person you were 30 years ago. And I guess that's where it makes a lot of sense. And it's like, yes, what do we want to see? We want to see Luke to be that hero that you grew up with. And he's that, nothing he can do is going to, be wrong. I mean, he's almost like a deity, like he's that legend that he talks about. But that's just not the truth. And if you don't humanize the character, I think that just becomes, it would just be boring if he was a perfect character. I mean, that's boring.
Correct. And that's where Ryan went with it. And that's not a bad choice. I don't think that's, and it's relatable for when you get old like me and you've had regrets and all these other things. But here's the thing with Kylo, well, Ben turning on him, and he's entertaining the thought of murdering his nephew there, and for a split second. And this is where everyone kind of gets a little wishy-washy. But again, Luke has been on this journey since Return of the Jedi, hunting down artifacts, the history of the Jedi, and he mentions Darth Sidious's rise and the Jedi's folly and the hubris and everything else, and he kind of fell into that. So you can see where, when he goes in and he's kind of mind-probing, if I'm wrong, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, he's mind-probing Ben there. When Ben, like he's looking into his thoughts and you hear things going on in his head or whatever, and that's when, the saber comes out and all that other stuff happens, and, however you want to interpret it, you interpret it. Is he wrong in thinking that for that moment? It's not 30 years ago where he's that hopeful young Jedi Knight trying to convince his father to come back to the good side. He was right then. But is he wrong in the sense knowing that he knows all this dark side stuff? Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying, look, Force visions, when you see the future in Star Wars, it usually doesn't work out for you. So, I would personally say maybe trying to quit looking at the future, because it's not going to provide. There's examples of that.
Well, says that
two examples of that in this movie. Yeah, and they both see two different futures, and Anakin causes the future he sees to actually happen. Luke sees, kind of feels them in pain, and they haven't even been caught yet in Empire Strikes Back. They weren't being tortured at the time. He foresaw them, being, and Yoda says, it is the future, you see. So, and then he takes off to go save them, and that ends up being a setback for him, obviously things that needed to happen for the narrative of the movie and things like that. But for a character, he took a setback there. So, this whole thing about looking into the future, these characters probably, shouldn't do that very much. So,
Well,
I mean, because Rey and Kylo were wrong. Again, like, don't look into the future, guys. It's scary.
Well, my other thing is when he's feeling out Ben there, is the line that he says Ben's heart had already turned? It's not. He doesn't mention his mind or anything else. He mentions his heart, which is why Luke has that moment. And then, of course, Rey calls him out and says, "You didn't give him that choice," which is interesting because that's what Luke said. There's still good in him and all that other stuff. So, I don't know. Well,
I just wonder if there's some, like, Luke has some kind of if he's hypersensitive over Ben turning because he doesn't trust his own bloodline. He's literally like paranoid, more so than he would be the other students, because maybe Luke knows what, the dark feelings, what those can feel like. He's been there before. He's come close to the dark side, and he knows that Darth Vader was his father. So this is a fate that could have been. He could have been Darth Vader. He could have made the choice to join the Emperor, and he could have been doing evil acts to that day, in the Empire. Like, it was a choice he had. And yeah, I mean, he didn't give Ben that choice, but I just wonder if he's the reason why he got so scared of that possible future, is what I'll call it, is that he was just because just to go in there and do it. I mean, you're standing over his bed. That's kind of creepy to begin with. And,
uncles can be creepy, I mean, just
before the fact that you that you pull your lightsaber out, Ben.
Hi, Ben. But anyway, go ahead.
Can you take that shirt off? Don't listen to Rey. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, that's just kind of where I was just wondering. I'm just throwing it out there. Could he just be more paranoid because Ben is his bloodline and he knows what his bloodline can do and manifest? And again, maybe that's both something. Maybe if you want to take it that way, then maybe you could say, Luke is putting too much stock in the bloodline, and obviously Snoke seems to be, and then in Kylo too. They're all putting this faith in the bloodline of the Skywalkers, and there's all this talk in the movie of it. And so, I mean, I guess what you call that pride, which Luke talks about, and this hubris and all of these things. So I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm going with it, and I just maybe think he was overly paranoid.
At that moment, I think that's what creeped in his head.
Maybe he saw what he feared, and that seems to be when you go to the dark, you're seeing. It's not necessarily the future. It's a possible. It's maybe the dark future, because what you're doing is kind of dark. Like, you premeditatedly did something kind of underhanded, and where's that going to lead? Maybe to the dark side. I mean, because he snuck in there and was looking at his mind when he was sleeping. Like, that's kind of not okay.
True.
It's kind of weird. I'm just saying, like, it's underhanded. I'm not saying it makes him evil. I'm just saying it's kind of an underhanded thing. And where could an underhanded thing? I mean, it's a chain reaction, maybe.
Well, it's interesting because technically Ben was defending himself in that moment there. So you can't even, the whole downfall for Ben being that one moment, though, seems crazy. I would imagine it was a catalyst. That's what started the chain reaction.
Well, yeah. I think I really feel like it was, and people always say about Anakin's turn, and it was
so quick and all that.
It was too fast. And like, I don't agree with that at all. Like, because I think it was built up over, especially in 2 and then parts in 3. But I thought in 2 there was some subtle seeds that were laid, and we obviously see him do things. So my point with that is that it just, I didn't feel like that it all hinges on a moment. Like, you have these, and then you have to make a decision,
and it's usually a quick second to make that decision.
I mean, a serial killer isn't a serial killer until he kills that first person, Mike, and you're into the serial killer stuff. So maybe you could make some kind of a better metaphor or something than I could, or an analogy. But, a serial killer, yeah, maybe they're messed up, but they're not a killer until they actually do it, and they actually
get that euphoria
take
from
that first life, and then it leads to it's that one moment when they decide to finally
cross the
break
line,
the social convention, and they cross that line and they kill somebody, and then they go kill a bunch more people because they just can't stop, and it was a slow manifestation, but then there's one moment that defines everything, and you can't go back.
True, because like a serial killer, it's always been there. It's just almost like when Ray says it's always been there, and now it's awake, and there's nothing you can do about it, so to speak.
Yeah,
so
from a different point, of view, but yes, exactly the same thing, only different.
All right, so let's speak of Ray real quick. The reluctance of Luke to teach. Obviously, is this a bad thing? Because it's actually very different than what we saw, which is funny because when the trailer came out, we said, "Well, Ryan, we keep seeing things that look exactly alike," but that's not the case. Luke is really basically like, get off my lawn type of stuff, and is reluctant to teach, but he's still got that curiousness about him. Like I said, goes back to his hut and maybe thinks about things and realizes things are going to happen. And maybe he's testing her in a sense of seeing how long she'll stay there and test his patience and see how much she really wants to learn and stuff like that. So what did you think of his reluctance? Obviously, he's got a lot of weight. He's guilty. He feels guilty. He feels guilty about Ben, his own nephew, and Leia's son, as he later on says, and everything like that. And he's got blood on his hands, technically, a lot of it. So I don't know. What do you think? Is he? I don't blame him really for being reluctant to train somebody.
Well, I just, before I throw any thoughts on that, let me just read this Campbell passage real quick. Yes, sir. Because this, and then we can add on to it with this topic. The hero may have to be brought back from his supernatural adventure by assistance from without. That is to say, the world may have to come and get him, for the bliss in the deep abode is not lightly abandoned in favor of the self-scattering of the wakened state, who having cast off the world, we read, would desire to return again. He would only be there, and yet it is so far as one is alive, life will call. Society is jealous of those who remain away from it and will come knocking at that door. If the hero is unwilling, the disturber suffers an ugly shock. But on the other hand, if the summon one is only delayed, sealed is by the beatitude of the state of Joseph Campbell just kills me of the state of perfect being, which resembles death. An apparent rescue is effected, and the adventurer returns. So I know that's a lot to take in.
I'm glad you read it, not me. So
yeah, because this is written in 1949 words.
But that's all true right there. That's pretty much what happens. So my thing would be, go just look up the hero's journey on like whatever Wikipedia. It's like all there, like the pertinent information, and this passage is in there. So read it for yourself. But basically, I think what this is saying is Luke's situation here, and it even mentions that they might say, "No, I'm not coming back." And Ray's like, I can't believe, like, what? Like, I thought that this was going to be easy. And so she was in for an ugly shock, as it says. So, yeah, I mean, this ties right into the mythos, and the hero's journey is based off of myths and mythos, and that's how he came up with it. So it seems to be it's almost very literal in a way. It would appear that way just by what you read. It was like basically from the script. Basically,
yeah. It feels like it was like Ryan just rewrote it like to make sense in 2017.
Exactly. Like he's like, all right, I can substitute this here, that there. Okay, that works. Type of stuff here. But it's interesting for the characters, both of them, because in one sense, Ray, and we're going to get into the fight they have in a minute, but Ray kind of, in a way, redeems Luke. Not necessarily redeems him, but snaps him out of this, but even by him being a jerk. And he kind of gets triggered thanks to R2 playing the dirty trick, as he says, plays the message, and he comes back and says, all right, 3 lessons, which I thought was interesting that he said 3 lessons. And it almost reminded me, well, we'll get into that with Ray. When we get into Ray, we'll talk about all that stuff. But we only get 2 lessons here, Joe. We missed one, and I guess the other one's in the 20 minutes of deleted scenes or whatever like that.
No, it'll be in episode 9.
Well, maybe. I didn't even think of it that way. Look at that. You're making me think different things right here.
And if it's not, hopefully JJ listens to the podcast and he says, "Oh, wait a minute. Oh,
that's a great idea. All right. So, let's get into the first one where he's teaching her the Force, which we joked about, I think, on the second review show, where they have that moment where he's got the little thing and he's telling her to reach out with the Force and everything, and that's where we learn he's kind of closed off from the Force. Is that a bad thing that he closed off? Well, let's get into that first. Him closing off to the Force, which is probably why Leia couldn't find him at all. I would imagine Leia could detect him.
Yeah, he didn't know about Han. We had a whole discussion on this once about would he have been able to feel Han dying.
And we said, that whole thing.
Well, I mean, you would think so, but we didn't know that fact. Now, I still, if he would have been actively kind of in the Force and hadn't shut it off, I still stand by our conclusion on that episode that I think that he would have been able to easily feel that. But as he had closed himself off, he did not. So, but that was like a conscious choice, like he decided to make those. So, completely out of the ballpark. Wasn't expecting to see that. And, I don't know if it's a good thing. It's not obviously we're meant to think that it's not a good thing for the galaxy, I think is the part of the story. But for him, I mean, obviously, you're going to go into exile,
shut it all down,
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I'm just not going to do any of this anymore. So,
well, let me ask you this, because Rey, is this kind of when she goes into the dark place and he's telling her to resist and everything? And it's funny because you'd think he would snap out of it and be in the Force at that moment to save her, but he doesn't do that at all. And then he has his reaction of like, oh, no, I can't train you. You're super powerful. I've been down this road before and it all leads to bad things and everything else. And by him not, again, it goes to that inaction thing that we spoke about a month ago or so, where she says, but I got nothing from you. That unintentionally sets her up with Ben, don't you think?
Well, I mean, that's where it all leads to, because she's like, if you're not coming back, then I have to go down this other road and try this, which I don't want to get into that, but I have a pretty significant thought on Rey, but I want to leave that for the Rey episode and like kind of what she's doing, between these two characters. But as far as, Luke just doesn't, he just seems, I don't know what the word is. I don't think that maybe scared is appropriate in a way. I think that there has to be fear of getting hurt again and loss. And I'm not saying he's afraid to go mono or have him fight. But yeah, I think it's just an emotional type of fear. He's like, I'm done with this. I've seen too much and I don't want to see any more, I don't know what will happen to me if I see any more. And, he's obviously ashamed of himself and
even the family in a way, like the bloodline, everything. Like he's a Jedi, obviously.
The Jedi, Jedi, he's ashamed of. He talks about the hubris, which is the pride, and the gods will strike you down if you go by the Greek tragedy.
Correct. And I went to
they thought of hubris.
I got transformed in my literary class back in college there, in my community college days, when they were talking about the hubris and the pride.
Well, he said, and it's funny because he says the word twice, and I feel like it, like the second time was like, yes, that's right, I said hubris
exactly,
twice.
Like, yes, I used.
It was just like, I'm gonna use it again.
Yes, I used the fancy college word, so deal with it. But that was one of my favorite scenes where he's talking about the past and himself and the family and the pain that was in his eyes when he said, "My nephew," her son, where he's distraught over it. And then you get down to that layer of why he's in hiding and why he's like, I don't want to be, I come out here to be found, where he's talking to Chewie.
I didn't really get, let me ask you this though, when he talks about, I took her son, and he's talking about, he says, oh, Han was Han about it. But when he says Leia though, like again, I've only got to see it twice because I had to go back to work, and this is my first night off. So I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to see it again. I'm off for a couple of days, so maybe I'm going to do that. But I'm trying to think, like, what did you take out of that? Because like when he talks about like, I took her, like did you get any sense of what he was trying to make out, what Leia's feelings were on that subject? Because I didn't get anything out of it.
I felt like he convinced her against her wishes at first, and Han was like, Han about it. Like, yeah, go ahead, take the kid. He's a freaking nut. So do something with him. And Leia was kind
He's got too much Vader in him.
Correct. And I think Leia was a bit torn about it. And, I think Luke took it upon himself. Like, he'll train him. He'll make sure he does the right thing. And that went wrong. And he blames himself and he feels bad about it. And I think that's what really happened there. That's why you see that pain.
Well, and Leia does say in The Force Awakens, she says, when I sent him with Luke, that's when I lost him. So it feels like he was a bit older. I still think that he was a bit older before she sent him off to Luke, whatever, preteen, 19, teenager.
20,
I don't know. No, I don't even think it was that. I would think he'd been with him a while, don't you think?
I got that sense, yeah.
Because he says that's what he says. He says that he took Ben and 12 followers, and they started this. But I mean, how many years until he started it? How many years until it ended? Because in the visual dictionary, it says that the galaxy at large
didn't know,
or whatever, didn't know that the Jedi had fallen because they didn't even know where the place was. So it was probably very little information coming out, which is obviously a symbolism for Disney and in real life Lucasfilm, them trying to keep all their leaks in. That's what the Jedi are doing. It's a real world metaphor there. I'm just kidding. That's ridiculous.
And we still didn't get the location of where the Jedi Temple was that he had.
No. Like there's little details like that you're just, but that's like the hardcore, like you would just, how can you bring that up in the exposition and just say, yeah, we had it there? Like I get that, but
well, it's like
it could be something in a visual dictionary or something like that too. I mean, that could have been included in that. At this point, it's not. Maybe we get something like that later, but I think as the hardcore fans, like we're always thinking like, oh, I want this little detail or I want that little detail said. And that's, that's kind of hard to do in a movie because it's like
you get so much going on. You can't get into that detail.
It can hurt it could just hurt the writing and the flow of dialogue and stuff. It's like, doesn't that kind of seem out of place for them to just kind of just be mentioning that? Or is it too much information for the casual fan, I guess is what I'm saying. So anyway, we'll get back to Luke, but, I just think it was just, I didn't get a whole lot out of that with the Leia thing. I'm not really sure where to lean on that and how she really felt. But eventually she thought it was bad enough and she had to give him over.
Yeah. Well, I think that's how I took it. At least I have now. I'll have to watch it again and kind of read it and see if there's anything else going on there. But the side note with the visual dictionary, which you and I kind of went back and forth today, a little bit in Discord, where I'd mentioned, well, it shows Luke in the visual dictionary, the map of the stars, and it shows he left from Kashyyyk to the Jedi Temple on Osh 2. I thought that was interesting, but, I said he met Han and Leia, and then you said, well, no, I doubt he met Leia, which is possible because that ties into what we were just saying here, where, Luke took Ben and he felt bad about it because things were bad, where Han would be Han about it. Han wouldn't really, I think Han would be more understanding, and then maybe he tells Han, and then they just part ways or something like that. But anyway, well, let's get into the whole where Luke is talking about the pride of the Jedi, and he's in the lesson where he's talking to Rey, and he says, you feel the dark and the light, and you feel the balance and everything. And then he says, that's the Jedi. It doesn't belong to them. It doesn't belong to the Sith. It just belongs. That type of thing. I thought that was awesome.
Like, look, I mean, is there some truth in what he's saying? But yes, there is. But is he also a little bit jaded at this point? I think
Correct.
I think he's kind of going a little bit too far with it. I mean, it is the truth, but it's also, he's rationalizing why I should be giving this up, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Like, he's rationalizing, see, like, I'm not the only one that failed. Like, I failed, they failed before me, and this is stupid, and we just got to end this. And he's rationalizing it, and like, no, it wasn't just my fault.
Like
this
his father
is a Jedi
was.
thing. It's a Jedi thing. I'm not saying he's trying to pass the blame on. I'm just saying he's like, this has happened before. This isn't coincidence. So I think he's just a little bit jaded on top of knowing the truth. And I mean, he does know the truth, and I'm not saying that's a fabrication, but it's just a very harsh way of looking at it. It's like he was listening to our podcast.
Well, it's like I've mentioned to a few people where I said he kind of throws Obi-Wan under the bus because he trained Anakin. He doesn't mention Obi-Wan's name, and they don't have a scene together or anything, which makes me think at some point we'll get a scene where they're kind of arguing with each other, which is what I wanted with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, where they kind of just go their separate ways.
Now they can have a Force Ghost battle.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That'd be fun. With Snoke, by the way.
Let's save that. Let's save that for Rebels.
Yeah, with Snoke. Snoke and him can duel it out in Force Heaven, I guess. But anyway, what did you think of that scene where he's just saying the hubris of the Jedi, all that stuff, where he's kind of, and then I think you're right, where he's just trying to rationalize, like Anakin did.
Yeah, I mean, from a character standpoint, that's where I'm seeing it. Obviously, I loved when he was talking about it just from a movie perspective, but the kind of stay on his character, I mean, yeah, I think that it was maybe, that's where I'm going with it now. I mean, maybe somebody will say something and say, well, what about this angle on it? And maybe I'll change my mind. But But for now, I kind of just have that feeling that this was it's while being true, it's also a bit of rationalizing because he's just become so cynical and jaded and he's broken.
Backing up his theories, so to speak, and stuff like that.
You got to pile that stuff on because somebody's going to just pop your theory bubble. So you got to get all the evidence and make yourself feel comfortable for as long as you can before somebody shatters your world, Ryan Johnson.
Like a big mirror in the cave.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, let's get into Luke and Rey and their dynamic being uncomfortable, I guess you could say. There's scenes that where, she's tagging along this Jedi Master, like when she's following him where he's going to get the green milk from that was the most disturbing scene in Star Wars ever.
I still just love when she turns away, like, because the thing
looks at her.
She doesn't turn away from any of it, but they make eye contact, and she was like, "No, that's too much," and she has to turn away. Like, I don't know. Like, I thought that was after all that, that's what made her turn away. I just thought it was just very funny.
But in any case. But you see when she's following him, she's got this pride in her eyes and like, all right, I'm going to keep tagging along and eventually you'll break down and all that other stuff. And then we have that disgusting point. I don't know what Luke's rationale would be for, obviously he had his daily chores, he had to do his thing and he had to survive and Ryan wanted to show that, but maybe this was a little excessive here, but it was in a sense where he's taking the milk and showing Rey that I am not this superhero that you think I am. I'm just a regular guy right here, and I'm trying to survive. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I think he's trying to gross her out. Basically,
yeah, that's
what it comes down to. It's a second grade antic or something. I guess I don't know. I don't know what grade kids are still trying to gross each other out at because I don't have any. But it feels like that. It's very kind of that immature. And I'm not saying Luke is immature, but I think that men can just kind of be that way. And it's like kind of very, elementary school-ish, I guess you could say.
Our mentality is about a 10-year-old, usually. But, anyway, with Rey, I thought it was interesting that we didn't get to see this on camera, but she obviously went to Chewie after that and was like, all right, I can't reach him, Chewie, blah, 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 blah. And Chewie, who's probably very hungry, which is why he's more irritable than anything else because he tried to eat a porg and he couldn't. So
they got to the door and Rey says, "Punch it, Chewie."
Exactly, and that's what he did. And then Luke's face was like, "Chewie?" Like it was just the funniest thing. And it was just interesting that, and then he gets into that whole, you think I came to the most unfindable place to be found in that? And even Chewie, like you would think Chewie would kind of snap him out of it too. I mean, I get the sense he was happy Chewie was there. But I think it was funny that like Rey went over to Chewie to kind of like, hey, get this guy out of the whole thing. But what did you think of that scene with like his reluctance with Chewie even, and finding out about Han, where it wasn't like, I mean, granted it was probably off camera and we'll get the details in the book of how that really went down after the fact. But what did you think of that whole thing? And we'll get into more with Rey and Luke and their cane fight, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you can pull all the bags, you can pull these tricks out and mention all these people with Leia, and you can bring Chewie in front of me, but he's just going to be pretty stoic on just saying, and just say, I'm not doing this. Like, you can't bring back, there's nothing you can do that's going to change my mind. And, I mean, it's, even R2, he tries to tell him, I wish I could make you understand. I'm not doing it. Even seeing R2 isn't enough. And then, I mean, even when he sees
the Leia message, he's not completely convinced. It's just, he's being softened up like throughout this whole thing. And he says, well, I'll teach you, but I'm going to teach you why they should end. And like, that's where it all comes from. So he's not teaching her to be the next Jedi. He's teaching her just enough, and it's like, see, now you see my side and why the Jedi should end. But that's him again, trying, like you'd said, trying to convince himself why it needs to end. But that's not really the truth. And at the end,
well, maybe he needs some kind of
an awakening,
confirmation, and that's why he's like, and maybe I'll tell all this girl all this stuff, and then maybe she'll agree with me, and then I'll know it's the right thing.
No, that's true.
Because then he asks Yoda. Because like maybe he just needs somebody to freaking talk to, you know what I mean?
Don't
I mean,
turn off the Force, and you will.
He basically, he basically went Tom Hanks on us here,
Well said. But well, actually, it's the flamethrower, I guess you could say. But well, let's get into their fight now. It's funny because at the top of the show when we're coming on air, you and I kind of both agreed that the best fight in the whole movie was Luke and Rey sparring there with the Force and all that other stuff. I don't know. What did you think of that whole fight scene?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't call it sparring, but I wouldn't call it
a full-blown fight.
I think Luke was defending himself, and I think that if he wanted to, like, he probably could have taken her down, but he wasn't maybe making any offensive moves. I don't know. And then she calls the lightsaber, and that turns the tables in her favor. But
and I did feel bad because there's that whole.
I just thought it was pretty cool. I just thought I don't know if it was the best. I mean, the Kylo and Rey scene with the guards and everything was pretty cool, but and Luke and Kylo was more dramatic than necessarily like kind of cool fighting, I guess you'd say. There was a good few moments, but it wasn't like
this is the most
a regular lightsaber duel. So
this was like. I think.
Well, and this was more like a sword fight. It's really the only kind of hand-to-hand like sword fight we get because it's the closest thing we really get to a lightsaber fight, really, because
it harkens back to the old Lawrence of Arabia films and the swashbuckling. It actually made me think of that, like because George was such a fan of that, where they're doing those old sword fights and everything like that. Or what do you think? I'm going to take my laser sword out and fight the whole First Order? That made me laugh and stuff, but I thought it was a pretty good intimate.
Well, it's funny because that's kind of what he does.
Yeah, exactly. Almost like he was giving a wink and a nod to Rey or something like that. But this fight I felt was very intimate. And then like when she pulls the saber on him, I'm like, oh, you can't do that. That's like, you can't shoot a guy with his own gun type of thing. That's just not the right thing to do. I forgot what movie that was from when he's going, you shoot me with my own gun, that type of thing. And then I thought of that. And it was interesting that Luke that's when he got a little serious when she calls the lightsaber there. I was hoping he would do the whole. Now this is just me being a Mortis fanboy, where he would have done what the father did, grabbed it and just shoved it back in the hilt and made people go, oh, like that would have been awesome. But we didn't get that. Sorry. But in any case, we'll move on to.
Well, she tries to hand it back to him at that point.
Yeah, and he's like, whatever.
And then he still won't take it. And then she's like, well, then maybe Ben is the last hope there thing. So. I mean, there you go. So, I mean, that's kind of the end of...
And he does warn her, though. This isn't going to go the way you think. And it doesn't, although it appears to be at first. Like, she thinks it's going to be that way. And then, of course, reality hits.
Well, it's not the way that Kylo, whatever he's describing, that doesn't end up happening. So, again, quit trying to look into the future. It's not going to help you because it's going to cloud your judgment going into the future. And you're going to just make that future become reality. I mean, so... Guys, like I'm telling all the Star Wars characters, it's like a public service announcement.
Kanan's the only one that knows that. Like Kanan's the one who said,
"Quit looking into the future."
Kanan's the only one that told Ezra, like, don't believe what you see.
So and this is a PSA to the fans. Like anything that was said about future things, like it's completely like all that means is that it's completely wide open, and JJ can do whatever he wants. Ryan kind of left, like while JJ kind of like it felt like he left it. You have to almost start it right here. Like you almost have to have no time jump. Ryan literally just did the exact opposite, which is kind of a balancing act between the two movies, if you kind of think about it. And he left all this open at the end of the movie. And JJ can literally do just about anything at this point when it felt like, okay, this has to happen, this has to happen, and this has to happen in episode 8. And then Ryan's like, I'm not going to do it anyway. So I don't know. It's just interesting. I know I'm off topic with that, but I just had to get that. Well, let
me get to this. Where Luke goes back up to the temple, and this is before he fights Rey and everything like that with Kylo and that whole thing. Where he goes up and he contacts Leia and finds out and kind of wakes her up, and she says Luke and that, and he finally in tune with the Force, like he wakes up and stuff, and then he goes and looks for Rey. I almost felt like at that moment he was getting back into the fight. Like he was ready. All right, I'll train her a little bit more. He seemed a little bit happy when he was looking for Rey and stuff like that. But of course, things have happened. She obviously saw things in the mirror, and then he walks in and he sees them both there, and then flips his lid and has that whole thing. But what did you think of that moment where he finally decides to? Obviously, Rey was awakening something in him, I would think. No, and then he goes up and he finds out about Leia, and he's back into the Force. So, what were your thoughts when he come back to the Force, so to speak?
Oh, I mean, obviously it was as slow of a burn as they could make it in the movie, but, just time considering with everything else. But, they kind of slow burn it, and then he gets there, and it's like, okay, like finally I have some human interaction, I think is really what's going on. And when he has somebody there reminding him that there's people out there in pain, you can't just shut that off. You can shut the force off, but somebody sitting there telling you, like, I mean, it's got to be hard for him. And he knows Leia's out there and Leia's wanting to see him and all that and to come back and help her. I mean, she's a constant reminder. Rey would be a constant reminder of that while she's on the island.
Well, because she ain't going anywhere either. So, yeah.
So, I mean, it's just kind of, and he doesn't kick her off. Like, he's not getting violent over it or anything like that. He's just like, get off my lawn, kid, I'm going to, it's literally Luke doing his best Harrison Ford impression.
Pretty much. But
not Han Solo, Harrison Ford.
But I guess he kind of learns the lesson of, like, you can't escape your past. Like, no matter how hard you try, you go off to this island where you could not be found, it'll eventually catch up to you. You can't ignore it fully. You have to embrace it and accept it and go from there. You can't just completely ignore it. And I think that was the lesson there. I think that he kind of came around to that. But then again, Kylo comes in and he ruins everything. And Luke is like, I ain't training you and all that other stuff. But now when Rey leaves and Luke is sitting there like kind of watching off and thinking of things, do you think that's, and then we get into, let's get to the Luke and Yoda scene where he's going down, get the torch, he's going to burn the tree and everything. And Yoda shows up and he goes, Master Yoda, and which made me think of Count Dooku for some reason when he says, Master Yoda, and he's going to burn it. And he goes to, and then, he's going to burn it, but he can't do it. Like, he can't let go of that whole, what he's come this far for in his life. Now, this is a bit of contention as well. He's been 30 years or whatever searching for this knowledge, tries to pass on what he's learned, which Yoda told him to do, all these things, and then he just can't get rid of that. And then, of course, Yoda lights the tree on fire and he tries to get the books, and then, we have that whole thing. But what did you think of that whole scene there? And then he's...
what? You know what I just realized? Like when he talks about, like, is it like a double thing? Is it like a double entendre? Like that he's saying that those books contain nothing that she doesn't already possess? Because she stole them. Like, he knows she stole them.
Yes.
It's not like a
Luke
like
doesn't though. For some reason.
I thought this is what I thought. It was like a spiritual thing he was talking about. She doesn't need those books. She's got the Force. Like, that's what really matters. That's the way I took it until like literally 3 seconds ago. And he literally knows she stole them. So does it mean both or just that she stole them?
Well, it's Yoda.
And he knows
so
it.
It's probably both.
But like I literally, am I stupid for just realizing that?
No,
like I feel,
no, you're not. But it's funny that like he's playing another joke on Luke, but it's also a lesson. Like we went right back to Empire Strikes Back, where they're having one more lesson there, and he's telling him it's time for him to let go. He didn't say anything about the Jedi Order. Like I think a lot of people see it, and they like the first thing I thought like Yoda's agreeing with Luke about getting rid of the Jedi Order. No. He's talking about Luke letting go of all this other stuff, but he stresses the point where he says we can't lose Rey. We lost Ben Solo, but we can't lose Rey. And I think that's when Luke might turn around and does his final act. I think this is where the kind of it clicks in for him, so to speak. And Yoda helped him get rid of his past and the baggage that he had, and kind of
look, that's a repeating theme for multiple characters in this movie, like with the balance and all that. There's a ton of that. It's, as Joe said in the Discord, it's dripping with symbolism of balance all over the movie, whether it's a visual, whether it's a storyline. It's all over the place in this movie. But also something that's a repeating theme in this movie is literally the line that Kylo Ben Solo says is that, kill the kill it if you have to. Get rid of the past. And that's what really letting go of failure is it not? It's the same lesson, but Kylo looks at it from a completely different perspective than Yoda is, even though they're saying the exact same thing.
Which goes back to what Yoda says to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith, don't be attached, mourn them, do not, that whole thing there. It's just a different way to go about it. Like Kylo's doing it for evil purposes, where Yoda's doing it for more peaceful purposes and not to...
You're literally like you literally almost have the same philosophy. You're just taking he's just taking extreme actions like to get there, when really what the Jedi do is let it roll off your shoulders. And he's like, no, I will literally just kill all of you.
Exactly. Well, which is why I bet, like, you know, with Jedi Prime on the mosaic tile on the floor and that, and everyone thinks it's Snoke. I don't think it's Snoke, to be honest. But you can tell there's balance in that mosaic.
Well, it's holding a broom. It's Broom Boy.
Oh, well, maybe.
I'm kidding.
Here we go. We get the Broom Boy theory starting all on this show. But anyway,
Rey is Jedi Prime. Get out of here.
Well,
let's go.
Reincarnated.
We got to start a new.
Yes.
We need a new Rey
Oh,
theory.
jeez. Well, that's probably going to be a YouTube video in 10 minutes from now. But in any case, what else did you think of Yoda and what he's saying to Luke and the whole calling the lightning down and helping Luke get over that hump? Do you think this is?
I mean, it's the same. Like I was just talking about the theme with the balance, though. This is one of those the scenes, and Luke was just teaching the lesson, but he doesn't even grasp it. Like, he's teaching the lesson to Rey, and he's saying all the words, but is he even feeling or understanding what he's even saying? I wonder, because Yoda pretty much tells him, you know, failure is a part of it too.
It's the best teacher.
But failure and succeeding. And then there's, you know, everything else in the middle. And that's what, you know, when he talks about the violence and the peace and what Rey is describing, it's all these, they're the polar opposites of each other, but they're, the same, you know, they're opposite ends of the spectrum, and then there's the middle, and that's the Force and all of this. And Luke is literally saying all that, but he's not grasping any of it, and it takes Yoda bonking him on the head to remind him and say, hey, you know, listen to your own teachings here. Like, you know the way, you just don't believe it anymore because you're so jaded.
Exactly. And I think this is where he starts to snap out of it, and of course then, you know, the movie goes on and Luke is by himself to contemplate. I hope we get something in the novel that maybe expounds upon what Luke is thinking here and why we see him up on the temple again in the Jedi garb. And
I hope he just threw one last intergalactic kegger before
with the caretakers. They all got together, had that monk wine and beer, and had some fun. And, you know,
we're not hosting an intergalactic kegger.
Yeah, exactly. But all right,
it's from Men in Black.
Well, let's get to Luke and Leia, the very emotional scene. And I thought this is when Luke the old Luke that we remember is kind of back. Like, he's kind of, when he gives her the dice and says, no one's ever truly gone. I thought that was very touching, kind of ominous in a way, because we know it was probably I knew it was going to happen going forward and stuff like that. And of course, I don't know how people didn't realize he looked like Chuck Norris with the darker beard and the hair and everything, and how people couldn't figure out.
Well, do you notice how, like, there's so many people in the background, like when he walked,
and they're all like
there's so many people in that room. Well, there's so many people in that room, yet when they're framing that shot, they almost make it just so it just looks like the two of them and everyone else has disappeared.
No, I didn't even look at that. I'll have to look at that again.
Watch it again, and I think it's an artistic choice. Like, I don't think that he brought her. You can see somebody kind of in the right corner, but just notice that room is full of people. Like, there's resistance people and 3POs in there. But after he, like, kneels down and they're framing them, he's on the left and she's on the right. Like, you see one guy standing over there, so you know they're still around everybody. But the way it's framed, it really just feels like this is very intimate. This is just the two of them having this moment together. And it almost felt like that way. And then he gets up, but then C-3PO sees him too. So you know it's not just Leia seeing him. And then that's reconfirmed, because everybody's like, why is Luke Skywalker walking out there? So everybody saw him, but it was just a neat framing of the shot, in my opinion. So check that out next time anybody watches the movie.
Well, see, it's interesting.
And see if you don't notice that. But I mean, yeah, it was very emotional, I think, on again, for kind of two reasons. Because we finally see this reunion between these characters, but also this felt like Mark Hamill saying goodbye to Carrie Fisher.
Yeah,
in a way.
A little bit, yeah. And there was forgiveness there too for the characters themselves. But I agree with you. It felt like it was very especially when he kisses his forehead. I got a little choked up myself, because that was like his final goodbye in a sense. Like, that was even us saying goodbye to Carrie in a way. It was pretty touching, that whole moment. And he gives the dice, you know, no one's ever truly gone, which was it's kind of haunting in a way when you think about what he says to her, knowing what happened to Carrie a year ago from I think yesterday or the day before while we're recording this. But the dice, And the physical stuff is pretty interesting because he kisses her on the forehead, he touches her hand and gives her the dice, and it's weird because the dice disappear after. But we'll get into that when we get to Kylo and stuff like that. But I also,
well,
go ahead.
First of all, why would they still be there? Did Leia drop them on the ground for Ben to find?
I'm wondering that. I don't,
Is that like literally dropping seeds on the ground and hoping something grows from that? Like,
well, we're gonna have to investigate
you
that.
got two dice. I don't think we see her drop it, but why else would he have seen that on the ground?
Or is that Luke doing that to him?
But I know it disappears, but I'm saying that. So that means that the dice that Luke handed her were also the ones that disappear, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, correct. And that's how I took it.
So those are part of the projection, but he. So what I'm saying is that, there's not just multiple projections of the same thing. Leia dropped the projection, I guess is what I'm saying.
Correct. Or Luke projected it after where Kylo would be, and he kind of just did it to play this, the joke with him.
So either way, is it like a planting of a seed, and it's like you're going to get like this one last
comfort
moment, or maybe that's why he's able, maybe because it's something from the Falcon. Maybe that's why he's able to see Rey maybe for the last time through the Force. We don't know.
Possible.
And then she shuts the door on him, as I said on the previous ones. I don't know. Obviously, we're getting off the topic of Luke there.
But it's interesting with Luke because when you read the visual dictionary and you see stuff, he has all these trinkets that he's held on to, and he couldn't let go. And he purposely goes in the Falcon, he grabs the dice and brings that back as a memento. Like he was collecting kind of, again, this must run in the family where you collect heirlooms and stuff like that. And he was bringing it up into his hut. I imagine that's what he was doing, just to have a memento. Or maybe he had this plan all along where he was going to project it and give it to Leia and make his peace. That's a possibility. Or he just figured I'd have one last thing of Han because I have my X-Wing foil is my door, and I got the compass and all these other things, all these other trinkets in my little hut there. So just to reminisce when I'm lonely and bored or whatever. But anyway, let's get into Kylo and Luke confronting. And this is an interesting scene because and one thing that Mark had said in the prior movie with The Force Awakens, not that I really want to tie what Mark has to say in it, he's like, he thought it would be more gravity if Leia and Luke saw Han getting impaled than Finn and Rey because they just met, really. And in a sense, that's what I feared going into this scene with him and Kylo, because we don't have any of that backstory, really. Yeah, we had the flashbacks and we had the young-looking Ben and kind of had that look of fear.
I think there actually is enough, Mike, because
you do.
Because we know. Because Kylo, I think it maybe just goes into the whole idea of what Kylo's mission was in the Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
like this is a confrontation that has been building, regardless of the information we know. This is a confrontation that has been literally brewing for 4 hours of movie time or more than 4 hours.
Well, yeah,
really, at that
that's
point.
True.
Like literally, what is his mission? Find Luke, find Luke, find Luke. And I know Katie disagrees that he quits caring about that. I can't disagree more.
Well, when he says fire every gun on that man, I think that means he kind of cares a bit, just a little bit.
Yeah, I think that this whole where it quit being. I'm not trying to call Katie out. I apologize. I'm teasing with you, Katie, because you do have a lot of good ideas. So I gotta throw you under the bus when I can kind of jab at you when I when I can. So I'm gonna apologize to her before she thinks I'm picking on her. So, but anyway. That's my point. I think there was a lot of build up to this, and we've been waiting for this confrontation to actually happen, and then it happened. So, and I didn't even realize, that he was that Ryan basically gives away that Luke's not really there because the salt isn't moving and turning red.
Well, that and his face is, changed. He's
been to the barber.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a shaving kit in the visual dictionary. So, he might have put, the just for men in and decided to show up. And, that's a possibility. But, I was going to say.
What if Yoda gave him a hair?
Exactly. Cut your hair, I will. But, I just.
Shave my back after this, you will.
We're way off topic now. But I was going to say, Joe, I that was my fear going in, that there wouldn't be any levity to it. But it felt genuine and it wasn't out of place in a way. I think the only time it was out of place is when they shot all the cannons on him and he did the whole brushing of the shoulder thing, which was truly mock, just being mock right there. But the interesting thing is I rationally...
Well, that just reminded me of an old Western.
Yeah, well, you said that in our review.
Yeah, that's the George way. Like, that's something... Yeah, so anyway, like, I can't... If it's something George would do put in the movie, I can't... I'm just gonna go along with it.
No,
like,
I don't think it was...
Sorry, prequel haters. I'm just going with George on this one. And I feel like that was a very George-esque moment that Ryan pulled off there. We got to give the credit to Ryan. I'm not giving it to George. I'm giving it to Ryan, but I just feel like it would be something George would do.
I didn't think it was a bad thing. And when Kylo tells him to fire all those guns on him, it made me think of like when Ben actually knows how powerful Luke really is. And technically he's right because of what Luke does.
He just saw his mom fly through space, so he's like, how do you kill these guys?
Well, I don't think he saw his mom fly. I think he still thinks mom's dead.
I know. I'm being facetious, but
because she yelled,
we saw it, and
because she yelled out, "I'm Mary Poppins, y'all." But anyway, but in any case, so he knows that. I took it as that as like he's the only one that would take Luke like seriously. He knows that threat. Because if Luke was physically there, he probably would have crushed all those ships. In my mind, that's probably what would have happened. But in any case, what did you think of their dialogue where, he says, "I failed you, Ben," which is a reverse of what Kenobi says to Anakin there, where he says, "I failed you." And he admits to his failure and he accepts that failure, which is the moral of the story here. And he's come back where he says, well, and this is where I say Rey kind of redeems him.
It's everybody. Luke is one of them, but it just seems like everybody has just given up on him at this point. Like, nobody is like, yeah, we can turn him.
Well, because
there's a possibility that maybe Rey still thinks that. I mean, you can't say that we don't really know her feelings on the subject at this point.
Well, because
she was basically written out of the third act of the movie. But
that's for a later argument. But
we'll talk about that later.
But Leia does even admit, like, I had hope, and now
he's gone, and Luke says, no one's ever really gone. But the way he treats Kylo, he doesn't really treat him that way. He treats him like, I'm not going to change your mind. I mean, your mind's made up, kid.
It's funny. He's like, "Are you here to save me?" No. He's like, "No, I'm not here for that at all." Which is true. But in a way, let me throw you this hypothetical out there, Joe. When Luke, obviously, he passes on, and we'll get to that in a moment. But what he's doing with Kylo here, obviously, he's buying time and he's getting Kylo all fired up. And of course, we get the "I'll see you around, kid." That whole thing is in a sense that, like, as we've speculated, Luke's going to do some amazing things as wink, wink, Force Ghost Luke. I think he's going to, like, haunt Kylo and maybe redeem Kylo in a way with all these crazy things that he could do as a Force Ghost, maybe intervene where Obi-Wan wouldn't intervene at some point. I don't know. What do you think? Is there a chance Luke could even redeem or help redeem Kylo with all these things that he could do? Because then again, the dice itself is like Luke planted that in a way. Leia drops it thinking, all right, there's no hope. But we don't really know the full story of that. But Luke kind of maybe saw this and had a projection of the dice and said, Kylo's going to see that and it's going to mess with his head. As he even says to Kylo, "I'll always be with you like your father." And that kind of gets Kylo all fired up as well. So do you think there's going to be moments of that where Luke's kind of in and out of his mind, kind of saying blah, 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 and maybe that sways him a little bit too? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know what to think of Luke. Like, I'm not ready to say that he's dead in the form that we know death in Star Wars. Like, they're always reinventing how people die in Star Wars. So, with what can kill you and everything else. So I completely expect Captain Phasma to be back
with spider legs.
I
Snoke with spider legs. Actually, yes.
Snoke. She's just going to be dressed as Darth Vader in the next one. She's all burned up and everything. So, and it might be almost tall enough to be Darth Vader. So there you go.
That's true.
No, I mean, with Luke, I don't know what it'll be. Like, I'm not ready to say that he's just going to be a normal Force Ghost. I think there's something else going on there. I think it's going to be, I think there's a possibility anyway. I mean, obviously, maybe what Ryan would do with Episode 9 is probably going to be something completely different than JJ and I can't think of the other guy's name that's writing the film with him this time, but I'm sure it's going to be something completely different. And it doesn't really matter what Ryan said. Hey, well, this is where I was going with it. I doubt that conversation even happened. At least it doesn't seem like that that's the direction they went with it. It was just kind of like, here you go. Here's a big, blank canvas, JJ. What can you do with it? And, that's where I kind of feel with Luke. I think you can I think you can do anything you want with Luke at this point. I think he could be the master of two worlds. Look that up in the hero's journey. I'm not going to read the passage.
Yeah, there's a lot there to read, and we're already short on time as it is.
So I mean, look into that. Go look into that. The master of two worlds, and it's like a 2-paragraph passage. It's not a lot, but you might get something out of it. So I mean, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I just think So there you go. I mean, it was I've only got to see the movie twice, but I feel like talking about it I've already podcasted about it 3 times, more times than I've even seen it, which is funny. But I feel like every time I have an in-depth conversation about it, like I like it more and I'm able to get more out of it. And I'm being able to deep dive on this. Cause the first couple days, Mike, I was having a hard time deep diving on this movie. It was really confusing me, and it's not something I'm used to.
I would agree with you. Like, Ryan did shake a few things and made us think differently. But like you just said here, and hopefully this helps some of our listeners that have struggled. Like I've said on our super scientific poll that we did, most people liked the movie. There's only maybe 40 people who hated it on our poll. Not that it's the end-all, be-all. But there's about 40 people who were mixed about it. And I'm getting better as we go along and we talk about things with me and Albert and you and the people in Discord. And when you read the Joseph Campbell thing, and I had another Joseph Campbell thing that compares with Buddha and Luke and everything, but we couldn't get into it today. Maybe down the line we can get into that. There are seeds of the mythos that are there. It's just things are a little different than what they normally are, and you just got to look for them. And that's not a bad thing. That's what we like to do on the show. We like to deep dive and discover things and kind of learn things.
I mean, look, if you're just going like maybe Star Wars mythos, things are changing a little bit. I don't think it's as drastic as everybody, like, this is the boldest movie and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's not that crazy. Like, there's not that many crazy things happening. Just chopping the bad guys dying, like Snoke dying, that, like, I don't know why we're shocked by that. Star Wars fans should be used to bad guys just keeling over and dying constantly.
In a lame way. Although it was kind of cool,
because that's what they do. That's what they do, because I think that you look, well, Snoke needed to be like Palpatine, and maybe that's what JJ was going for. And if JJ had done all 3 movies, JJ probably wouldn't have killed Snoke, and he would have made him more of a bigger part of it or somehow. But that's not the way Ryan saw it. So, I mean, I don't know. It's just, I just don't think that, it's as bold and risky as some people make it out to be, and I don't think it's as bitterly different and bad as the other half is. It's a balance. That's the whole point of the movie. Like, the whole movie is a metaphor for itself, and the way fans are reacting about this movie is exactly what the movie is about. It's really weird, actually, because it's so polarizing that it's actually complete opposite. It's so polarizing. It literally makes the argument for its message and storyline with what's actually happening. It's art imitating life, or life imitating art.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just to wrap it up quickly here, what did you think of Luke passing on or becoming one with the Force, if he really is? Wink, wink, wink. I know it's left to interpretation. I think he's gone part of the Force now. I had a problem that he left one movie too soon, but I thought it was a beautifully done way, and it was very peaceful with his character, and he sacrificed himself, and he found himself again in the Jedi way. As he said, I'm not going to be the last Jedi. Rey is the last Jedi at this point. He passed on what he learned in a sense to Rey, and Rey learned a valuable lesson as well and saved the day, helped get the Resistance and pass on the new basically passed on the torch there. But what did you think of the scene at the end? I think Rey kind of redeems him in a roundabout way, just not the way we're traditionally used to. And I'm going to have to look this up in a mythological sense, because I don't think it fits the normal mold like we saw with Return of the Jedi and stuff. But what are your final thoughts?
Oh, on Luke overall, I think that it's, I think we've covered it pretty thoroughly, actually. Like, I don't really know what else I could really point out. I guess I'll just say that I think that, the movie began out and he was jaded. You go back to the paranoia, perhaps, of his own bloodline, going back to the Ben thing. And, at the end, It's about transcendence. It's finding the balance and realizing that your failures and your successes and everything don't really define you. It's everything in between. It's every other moment in life. It's not, that one moment you succeeded or that one moment you failed, and neither one made your life, neither one crushed your life. It's it's finding that everyday life and being able to live with it. And as they say, we can all be the Buddha. You don't have to be praying all the time and doing all of these things. You can still have that kind of that transcendence and that spirituality, and that's kind of, but you can live a normal life, and you don't have to be a monk. You can be a kid, or you can be an adult, and you can have kids, or whatever it is. Everybody can kind of be the Buddha. And I think that's maybe some of the point here, because I think that there's a lot of those kind of themes going on.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that was pretty good for Luke Skywalker. I think we got more in depth than I actually thought we would with this, Joe. And I'm looking forward to Kylo next week, I think is what you said we were going to do. So we'll do Kylo next week, and I think Rey, and then we'll go on for the next month. You're going to be we're going to break down all the characters and all that other stuff. And that'll be interesting going forward, because I think we're going to have a lot more than we realize to talk about. So in any case, tell them where to like us, find us, and all that good stuff, Joe.
Yeah, at the Cantina Cast on Twitter and Instagram. That sounds about right. Facebook.com/the Cantina Cast. And if you guys want to hear Mike read Chewie and the Porgs, you can get us on Patreon and make a little quick cheap donation if you want to, and you should have access to that post he made. And of course, you can join us on Discord. Just Google search it, check the show notes, and all that good stuff.
That actually came out a little better than I thought, doing Chewie and the Porgs.
I haven't listened to it yet, but it's only like 6 minutes, so I'm going to do it. But it's really interesting. I've been seeing comments in the Discord, and it's, I kind of like have high expectations.
Oh, don't do that
this.
to me, man, because I'm going to feel really bad if it's really crappy. And you're like, what were you thinking, man? I mean, what was he thinking?
What was he thinking?
Exactly. There you go. There's a classic from the blast from the past. Anyway, we're out of here, folks. We'll catch you guys next week with Kylo.
Goodbye there.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.